Trapped in a coma, he was powerless. But when he woke up, the real nightmare began. The world had moved on without him. For weeks, Adam had been trapped in a cold, empty void, drifting between consciousness and oblivion. He could hear the rhythmic beeping of machines, the occasional murmurs of nurses, the low hum of fluorescent lights. But he couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't tell anyone that he was still here. But that wasn't the worst part, because he remembered. The memories came in fragments, jagged and incomplete, but real. The rain, the wind howling through the streets, his heart pounding as he ran, feet splashing through puddles, the feeling of raw terror crawling up his spine. And then, headlights. Too close, too fast. The screech of tires, the sickening thud, the unbearable pain. And the last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him whole, his father's face behind the wheel. Adam had been running from him, and his father had made sure he wouldn't get away. A chill ran through his consciousness as he lay trapped in his own body, helpless, powerless. He had woken up, but what if waking up only made things worse? At first, he thought he was dreaming. He had to be. Because if he were awake, really awake, he would be able to move. He would be able to open his eyes, wouldn't he? But the more he listened, the more he realized that this wasn't a nightmare he could wake up from. This was real. The first voices he recognized were the nurses. They spoke softly, their words a mixture of medical jargon and gentle reassurances. Though not for him, they were talking to his parents. He wanted to call out to them, to tell them he was there, that he could hear them, but no matter how hard he tried, his body refused to obey. No significant brain activity, one of the doctors said. A chill ran through Adam's consciousness. No significant brain activity? That wasn't true. He was here. He was thinking, listening, feeling. He wanted to scream that they were wrong, but the silence inside him was absolute. Then, his parents' voices cut through the sterile hum of the ICU. His mother's first. He could picture her standing beside his bed, wringing her hands, her voice trembling. "But there's still a chance, isn't there?" she asked. "People wake up from comas all the time." A pause. His father's voice came next, colder, more measured. "Some do, but most don't. And if they do, they're never the same." Adam's heart pounded. Why did his father sound so distant, so detached? He waited for the words he needed to hear, the words that would anchor him back to them. "We love you. We're not giving up on you. We'll wait as long as it takes." But they never came. Instead, his father sighed heavily. "We need to be realistic. Keeping him like this isn't fair. Not to him. Not to us." His mother didn't respond. Adam wanted to cry, to shake her, to beg her to say something, anything that meant she wasn't considering what it sounded like she was considering. But she remained silent. And in that silence, Adam felt his world begin to break. Time lost meaning. Adam couldn't tell if hours had passed, or days. He existed in an endless cycle of fear, frustration, and helplessness. The room around him remained unchanged. The steady hum of machines, the occasional footsteps of nurses, the murmurs of doctors discussing his condition. But none of it mattered. The only voices he cared about were his parents. And the more he listened, the more his heart shattered. His mother had stopped crying. That was the first thing he noticed. At the beginning, she had sobbed quietly at his bedside, whispering words of comfort, promising that he would wake up, that she was there. But now, there was only silence. Then, one day, if time even worked the same way for him anymore, his father spoke again. "I spoke to Dr. Reynolds," he said, his voice measured, emotionless. "They're saying if there's no improvement soon, we should consider other options." Adam's stomach twisted. Other options? He didn't need to hear the rest to know what that meant. His mother hesitated. I don't know if I can make that decision." A pause. "You think this is easy for me?" His father snapped. "Do you think I want this?" Adam flinched internally. He had never heard his father sound so sharp, so raw. "If we had just been more careful," his father muttered, almost to himself. "If he hadn't—" He stopped abruptly. Adam's mind reeled. If he hadn't what? For the first time, he felt something different from fear. Confusion. a deep, gnawing need to understand what had happened to him. Then his mother spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't our fault. He should have known better." Adam's thoughts froze. What were they talking about? What was his fault? And then, like a wave crashing over him, memories began to stir. Faint, blurry at first, but growing sharper, clearer. A cold night, rain on his skin, headlights, the screech of tires. Pain. The realization hit him with the force of a sledgehammer. The accident. He had been in a car accident. And now, listening to his parents, he wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that he was trapped in this motionless body, or the terrible suspicion creeping into his mind. His parents weren't just mourning him, they were blaming him. The memories crept in like shadows, slow and hazy at first, then sharp and unforgiving. Adam didn't want to remember, but now that the pieces were falling into place, he had no choice. It had been raining. He remembered that clearly now. The world outside had been drenched in silver sheets, the wind howling against the windows, and he had been outside in it running. His parents' voices pulled him back to the present. He never listened, his father muttered. Always so impulsive. His mother exhaled shakily. He was just a kid, Mark. Adam felt the sting of her words. Was. As if he were already gone. His father wasn't moved. A kid who shouldn't have been out that night. He never should have left the house. Adam's heart pounded. Left the house? Yes, that was right. He had snuck out. But why? Then it came back to him, clear as the day it happened. He had seen something he wasn't supposed to see. And that's when he ran. That's when the headlights came after him. That's when his father's car hit him. A tremor of rage, fear, and realization crashed over him. His father had done this to him, and he wasn't finished yet. The world inside Adam's mind was a storm of fragmented memories, a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. But outside, the world had moved on. Machines beeped in steady rhythm. Nurses walked past his room, murmuring about medications and test results. To them, he was just another patient, a boy frozen in time. But Adam wasn't gone. He was trapped. And then, something shifted. A sensation flickered at the edge of his consciousness, a spark in the darkness. It wasn't much, but it was real. His finger twitched. It was barely noticeable, the smallest movement against the hospital sheet, but it was enough. A nurse gasped. "Did you see that?" His mother, sitting beside his bed, jolted upright. "What?" I think his hand. His finger moved. Silence. Adam felt the energy rush through him, an urgency he hadn't known in weeks. He tried again, focusing with everything he had left. Another twitch. His mother let out a choked sob. "Adam?" His muscles screamed from weeks of inactivity, but he forced himself to do it again. Another flicker. Another motion. "I'm here. I'm still here." The nurse rushed out of the room. "I need Dr. Reynolds, now!" Adam could hear the hurried footsteps echoing in the hall. His mother's hands trembled as she gripped his. Then came the hardest part. He could feel something in his throat, a rawness, a weight he hadn't been able to lift before. But now, it was different. Something in his body was waking up. He swallowed, painful, slow. Then, a whisper. A single word. "Dad." His mother gasped so sharply that for a second, Adam thought she might collapse. Her fingers flew to her mouth, her eyes wide, disbelieving. "Oh my God." His voice was barely there, weak, broken. But it had been real. It had been heard. Adam felt exhaustion crashing over him, pulling him back into the abyss, but before the darkness took him again, he saw it. His mother was in shock. The hospital room, once a place of silent waiting, had erupted into motion. The nurse stood near the bed, her hands still trembling from what she had just witnessed. Adam had moved, and more than that, he had spoken. Even if it was just one word, it had been real. His mother sat frozen beside him, tears spilling down her face. "Adam," her voice broke as she brushed his hair back with shaking fingers. "You're coming back to us." Dr. Reynolds arrived moments later, moving with careful precision as he assessed the monitors. "What happened?" he asked, glancing at the nurse. he spoke. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her disbelief. It was faint, but I heard it. His mother heard it. He said, "Dad." A heavy silence filled the air. Dr. Reynolds nodded slowly, his professional mask intact, but Adam saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He turned to Adam, stepping closer. "Adam," he said in a calm, clear voice. "Can you hear me?" Adam's body still felt sluggish, uncooperative, but inside, he was screaming. "Yes, I can hear you. I've always been here." His fingers twitched. It was small, barely there. But Dr. Reynolds saw it. His mother let out a sob. "Oh my God," she whispered. He moved again. Dr. Reynolds exhaled. "That's an excellent sign." He turned to the nurse. "We need a full neurological exam. Order another round of scans immediately." His mother wiped her tears, smiling through them. "He's waking up." She turned back to Adam, her hands gripping his. "You're really waking up, sweetheart." For the first time since the accident, Adam felt hope. Then his mother did something that made his stomach twist. She reached for her phone. "I need to call Mark," she said breathlessly. "He has to know. He needs to be here." "Number." Adam's chest tightened, panic rushing through him. Not him. Not yet. The heart monitor spiked slightly, but no one seemed to notice his distress. His mother was already dialing. And just like that, his father was going to find out. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Adam's stomach drop. His mother had called him, and now he was here. The door to his hospital room creaked open, and the air inside shifted. The sterile scent of antiseptic and the soft hum of machines faded into the background. Everything else disappeared. Because Mark Foster had arrived, Adam's breath felt shallow, his pulse quickening. His father's figure filled the doorway, his posture as straight and controlled as ever. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't out of breath. He wasn't the kind of father who had just received the miraculous news that his son had woken up. He was composed. Too composed. His mother let out a trembling breath, standing quickly. "Mark," she said, her voice still thick with emotion. He spoke. Mark's eyes flickered to Adam, just for a second. And in that second, Adam saw it. Not relief. Fear. His father recovered almost instantly, forcing a small, tight-lipped smile. That's incredible." He stepped further into the room, the steady click of his shoes against the tile making Adam's skin crawl. He placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, squeezing it gently. "Claire, this is amazing news." But Adam saw through it, the tension in his father's fingers, the stiffness in his voice. This wasn't joy. This was a problem. Adam was a problem. Dr. Reynolds cleared his throat, stepping in beside Mark. "We're running a full neurological assessment. His responsiveness is a significant development. It could mean a real recovery." His father nodded, his expression perfectly neutral. "Of course, whatever he needs." Lies. Adam couldn't move much. He couldn't speak again yet. But he saw. His father had spent weeks assuming he was gone. Now, Adam was back. And Mark didn't know how much he remembered. Emma stood near the monitors, arms crossed, watching Mark closely. She wasn't fooled either. Adam could tell. Her eyes flicked between father and son, her lips pressing into a thin line. She knew something was off. Mark finally turned fully toward Adam, stepping closer to the bed. His mother sniffled, brushing Adam's hair back. "Sweetheart, your dad's here," she whispered. "He came as soon as I called." Adam wanted to laugh. No, he didn't. Mark had come because he had no choice. Adam's body still refused to obey him, but his mind was awake, fully awake. And trapped inside that unmovable body, he realized something chilling. His father wasn't just afraid of what Adam could say. He was trying to figure out how much time he had left before Adam said it. Mark studied him carefully, then took another step closer. His voice was low, just above a whisper. "Hey, bud," he said. "You gave us quite the scare." Adam wanted to scream. Mark tilted his head slightly, watching his son's face, his fingers tightening against the bedrail. His expression never changed, but Adam could feel the pressure of his stare. Then, in a voice so soft only Adam could hear, his father murmured, "I hope you don't remember too much." A chill ran through Adam's entire body. His father knew, and now the game had begun. Adam lay frozen in his hospital bed, but inside, his mind was burning. His father's words still echoed in his head. "I hope you don't remember too much." It wasn't a comforting phrase. It wasn't the voice of a relieved parent. It was a warning. Adam had spent weeks trapped in silence, drowning in confusion. But now, things were changing. His body was still weak, his voice barely there, but his mind was sharpening. The pieces were coming together, and now he knew what to look for. Mark straightened, turning back to his wife. "Claire, have the doctors said what his chances are?" Claire's expression softened. She was still wiping her tears, overwhelmed with emotion. "They said it's a miracle he's even responding. He could make a full recovery." Adam saw it. The brief flicker of tension in his father's face. The slight tightening of his jaw. It was gone in an instant, but it was there. His father didn't want him to recover. Emma was still near the machines, arms crossed, watching everything. She hadn't spoken, but Adam could tell she was analyzing every detail. Dr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "With time, we'll see how much of his speech and motor function return. For now, we need to be patient." Patient. Adam didn't have time to be patient, because his father was already trying to get ahead of the truth. Mark sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I can't believe this happened," he said, his voice perfectly measured. "I mean, after everything." Adam felt something crack open inside him. After everything. The words triggered something. A distant, hazy fragment of the night he had been running. The rain. The wind cutting through his clothes. The way his heartbeat had thundered as he sprinted through the streets. And then, voices. Not his own. Not his father's. Someone else had been there. The realization made his skin go cold. He hadn't just been running out of fear. He had been running because he saw something. His breathing hitched. He could feel the memory just out of reach, like a word on the tip of his tongue. His father was still talking. "I just wish I knew why you left the house that night, son," Mark continued, his voice smooth. "We always told you to be careful." Adam's stomach twisted. He could hear it now, the subtle test in his father's voice. He was fishing, trying to see how much Adam remembered. Emma seemed to pick up on it too. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Adam stayed silent, forcing his body to remain still. Mark sighed again, shaking his head. "But you know what? Maybe this is best. Maybe it's better if you don't remember." The moment the words left his lips, Adam remembered. The impact hit like a lightning bolt. The night of the accident, the house, the argument, the body, his father standing over someone, the blood. The moment Mark turned and saw Adam watching, that was why he ran. Not just out of fear, not just because of the argument, because he had seen his father kill someone. Adam's chest rose and fell rapidly, the heart monitor betraying his panic. His father's gaze flicked to the screen, watching the spike in Adam's pulse. For the first time, Mark's mask almost slipped. He knew. Adam remembered. And now, there was no turning back. Adam's pulse thundered in his ears. The realization sat in his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. His father had killed someone. He had seen it. And that was why he was here. Mark was still watching him, his sharp eyes scanning Adam's face, his breathing, the heart monitor that betrayed every ounce of fear surging through his body. He knows. He knows I remember. But Mark didn't react, not immediately. He had spent years perfecting his ability to lie. He was calculated, smooth, a man who could stand over a crime scene and walk away untouched. Now, he took a step back, shaking his head with a sigh. "I just wish we could go back," he murmured. "Fix everything." Adam wanted to scream. "Fix what? The fact that you tried to kill me? The fact that I know what you did?" But he still couldn't move. Mark turned to Claire, his mask perfectly back in place. "I'm gonna step outside for a moment, call some people, let them know the good news." Good news. Adam felt sick. His mother wiped her tears, nodding. "That's a good idea." She turned back to Adam, smoothing his hair like she used to when he was little. "Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart." "No, Mom, it's not." Mark took a step toward the door, then hesitated. For just a moment, his gaze flicked back to Adam, and even though his face remained calm, his eyes were cold. A silent message passed between them. You know, I know that you know, and I am not going to let you ruin me. Then, he walked out. The second the door clicked shut behind him, Emma moved. She had been watching everything. She had seen the way Mark looked at Adam, the way Adam had reacted in return. She turned to Dr. Reynolds, voice urgent. We need to run more tests. We need to get him fully examined immediately. Dr. Reynolds frowned. Emma, I understand your concern, but this is delicate. Number, her voice was sharp, firm. Something's wrong. We don't have time to wait. Adam's mother looked confused. Emma, what are you? But Emma was already at Adam's side, leaning close. Adam. Her voice was quiet but intense. I need you to tell me if you're in danger. Adam felt his throat tighten. For weeks, he had been alone in this fight. Trapped. Helpless. But now, someone was finally asking the right question. His fingers twitched. Emma's breath caught. I knew it, she whispered. Then, before anyone else could speak, a crash from the hallway, something loud, a commotion, raised voices, a nurse gasping, and then the unmistakable sound of a body hitting the floor. The entire room froze. Emma was the first to move. She rushed to the door, yanking it open, and stopped dead in her tracks. Adam couldn't see past her, but he heard the sharp inhale of breath. Then, her voice low, shocked. Oh my God! His mother rushed to see, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. Mark? Adam's heart pounded. What happened? Emma turned back, her expression pale. Your father, she started, voice shaken. He just collapsed. Adam's breath hitched. Mark Foster, the man who had tried to kill him, the man who had hidden a terrible secret for so long, was suddenly helpless. And for the first time since waking up, Adam felt something strange. Power. For the first time since the accident, Adam wasn't the only one powerless. His father, the man who had tried to kill him, who had walked into this hospital ready to silence him again, was now lying on the floor outside his hospital room. Collapsed. Helpless. The irony wasn't lost on him. His mother rushed out the door, her frantic voice cutting through the hallway. Mark! Oh my God! Someone help him! Adam's pulse pounded. Was this real? Or was Mark faking it? Had he realized that Adam remembered too much and pulled some kind of stunt? He strained his ears, listening past the chaotic noise outside. The sound of nurses scrambling, the shuffle of a stretcher, the flat, tense voice of a doctor. His heart rate is unstable. We need to move him now. Adam felt something cold crawl up his spine. This was real. Mark Foster wasn't pretending. Something was wrong. Emma turned back toward Adam, eyes wide, still trying to process what had just happened. I don't know what's going on, she muttered. 1 second he was walking down the hall, and then he just collapsed. She looked at Adam like she wanted to say something else, but instead, she hesitated. Then, she made a decision. I'll be back, she said. Then, she was gone. Adam could only listen as his father was wheeled down the hallway, his mother crying beside him. The sound of their voices faded. And then, silence. For the first time in weeks, Adam was alone. His mind raced. His father was incapacitated. This was his chance, his only chance, to figure out everything before Mark came back. A memory flashed. The night of the accident, the rain, the cold, the shadows stretching under streetlights, and the body. Adam squeezed his eyes shut. He had to remember. He had to put the pieces together. Another flash. His father, standing over someone, blood on his hands. The man on the ground, a face half submerged in water. And then, his father turning, seeing Adam, realizing he was there. His father had called his name, a voice full of something dark, something dangerous. And Adam had run. The pieces finally clicked together. His father hadn't just killed someone. The victim was his business partner. That's why Mark had been so desperate. That's why Adam had to die that night. Because he hadn't just witnessed a murder. He had witnessed the cover-up of something much bigger. The truth slammed into him with full force. And now, he was the only one left who knew it. His breathing hitched. The heart monitor beeped wildly. Emma walked back into the room, holding something in her hands. A file. She looked pale. Adam, she said, her voice low, steady. I found something. And I think your dad is in a lot more trouble than we thought. Adam stared at her. He already knew. But now, it was time to expose everything. The hospital room was filled with the soft hum of machines, but Adam barely heard them. Everything had led to this moment. Emma stood beside his bed, holding a folder in her hands, her knuckles white from gripping it so hard. Her expression was unreadable. I don't know how deep this goes, she said, voice low, urgent. But your dad, whatever he was involved in, it wasn't just one murder. Adam's breath caught. Emma flipped open the folder, scanning the documents quickly before lifting her gaze to him. The man your dad killed, his business partner, he wasn't just a threat to your father. He was about to blow the whistle on something big. Adam's pulse spiked. The monitor beside him beeped faster. His father hadn't just been covering up a single crime. He had been covering up a history of them. Emma took a deep breath. There are files here. Bank records, offshore accounts, missing reports. She shook her head. Your dad wasn't just running a business. He was running something illegal. And his partner was about to expose him. Adam squeezed his eyes shut, his mind spinning. His father had tried to kill him, not just because of what he saw that night, but because of what it meant. If Adam had lived to tell the truth, everything would have unraveled. But now, Mark was the one lying helpless. A nurse rushed into the room, her face pale. Mrs. Foster, she hesitated, voice tight. Your husband, I'm so sorry. Claire let out a soft gasp. What? What do you mean? The nurse swallowed. There was nothing we could do. He went into cardiac arrest. He's gone. Silence. Adam stared at the ceiling, his heart pounding, his breath unsteady. Mark Foster was dead. The man who had stolen his childhood, destroyed his body, and tried to erase him from existence, was gone. And yet, it wasn't over, because his secrets weren't buried with him. Emma tightened her grip on the folder. She turned to Adam, her voice calm but steady. You don't have to be afraid anymore. For the first time since the accident, Adam felt lighter. Mark had spent his entire life controlling the truth. But in the end, his silence spoke louder than anything else. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine what's coming next. Don't miss out on more gripping, emotional, and shocking stories. Subscribe now and be the first to experience them. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring even more incredible stories to life. So go ahead, subscribe, and join the journey.